This is Dirshu Mishna Berurah as we continue learning Hilchos Nisias Kapayim Siman Kuf Chav Ches Baruch Hashem, back up to date and trying to stay up to date. We pick it up in Sif Yud Aleph, teaches the Mechaber Kishem Machzirin, and when they turn around Pineihem, their faces, of course referring to the Kohanim, Kilapeyam, to the people, mevarchim, they make the bracha. Asher kedishon ubekdishas shalaroin v'tzivanu leverches am Yisrael bi'ahavo. The Kohanim make the bracha that Hashem has commanded them in the kedusha varoin and commanded them to bless Klal Yisrael ba'ahavo, with love. We've already seen one ramification of the word ahava, that there can't be any discord between the Kohanim and the people. And we pick it up for the Mishnah Berurah Sivkata Nem, which the Mishnah Berurah teaches us, Kishem Machzirim B'neim V'chulu V'yesh Rishayim. There are Rishayim Shesvir Lahu, that they hold the bracha zu mevarchim kaidim shemachzirim B'neim. Interesting. There are Rishayim, the Bir Halacha said they turn around, then they make the bracha. The Rishonim that say what? They make the bracha facing the Aroin, then turn around. So what do? Says the Mishnah Berurah of Amidaktikim. What are the Midaktikim? Those are precise in mitzvahs. Yoitzim Yidei Shneim. And this, of course, is what Kohanim do nowadays. Dahainu, which means they begin the bracha while facing the Aron Kodesh. Bracha, and then during the bracha, then machzirim b'neim klapiyam v'goymrim, and they complete the bracha. Mevarchis, if Kata Memalev says Mishnah Berurah Hainu shekulam mevarchim, they all make the bracha, all the kohanim. V'lo yenat shechri varich v'achirim yanu amen, and the rest of the kohanim answer amen. So before we go into Sif Yud Beis for a moment, let's look at the Dirshu over here. Number 58, that the Mishnah Berurah taught us that they turn around during the bracha. When? Says the Bircha Yosef, says the kids of Shulchan Aruch, when they're facing the Aron Kodesh, they say, Asher Kedishon B'Kdoshas Al Aron. Then they turn and then they say, V'tzivanu levarich es Amcha Yisrael bi'ahava. Whereas the Das Chesed La'alafim and the Ben Ish Chai, so we have a little bit of a machloikis in the world of the Sfardim. The Birkei Yosef, the Chida, the Ben Ish Chai, on the other hand, say that the Kohanim turn their faces before the word Ahava. And the Dirshu over concludes, it says the Buchasha, the Kohanim should do, they all should do one way. Meaning, we shouldn't have some Kohanim turning one time, other Kohanim turning another time. They all should turn in unison, in perfect synchronization, symphony, and harmony. And now, number 59 in Dirshu points out, why not? Why shouldn't one Kohen make the bracha and the rest of them answer amen? Says the Magen Avraham, because of the tiruf, it's going to mess each other up. What's the makar? The Shal Shuvas Ma'abit explains, we should be afraid that because they have to answer amen, they're come to make a mistake in the bracha of the Kohanim. And similarly, we see that the Shatz doesn't answer amen in the bracha Kohanim. Now that din, which is Sif Yotes, which we're going to get to, not today, is a debated point whether the Shatz should answer amen to the bracha of the Kohanim. B'siyata d'shemaya, hopefully we'll get there in tomorrow's shir. And with that we move on to Sif Yud Beis. Says the Mechaber, Magviim Yedeim keneged koisveim, they pick up their arms opposite their shoulders. Umagviim Yad Yeminit ksas lamala me'as malis. And of course, all the Ashkenazim, Yisraelim like myself, might not have noticed some of these fine nuances, but the Kohen's hands, the right is a drop higher than the left. And they stretch out their hands and they separate their fingers. And they make 5 air spaces. What are the 5 air spaces? Between the thumbs is another airspace. So that's if we have one over here, and then you got one in the middle and 2 on the other hand. So if we have 2 on each hand and 1 in the middle, that's going to be your 5 air spaces. That that the palms are to the ground and the backs are to Shamayim. Now, as we're going to see, I don't know if we're going to see in completion, but there are different minahagim, different Kabbalahs, exactly how this is done, but let's see as much as we could see. Says the Mishnah Berurah Sivkatin Yud Mem Beis, Magbin Yedei, as we've seen already, that we learned this bracha from the fact that it says that Aaron HaKohen raised up his hands and he blessed Klal Yisrael. Hare, what do we see? We have to stretch out, lift up our hands. His hand. So we see how every word of the Torah is so precise. Yadav is spelled without the Yod. So because there's no Yod, we see it's like Yadai. So one hand is a drop higher than the other. The right is going to be a lot higher than the left. Umistama, says the Mishnah Berurah, we're learning out, is the Yamanit. It's the right hand. Yad Yamanit is Ksasiv Kotam and Gimli Kalmakam Sarkli Zayir. One has to be careful. Shenia Gudal Hayamin Al Gudal Al Small Shlayis Bardu. The thumb of the right and the thumb of the left should not be separated. Kidei Shlayis Shaver Achaloi, not to break open the window. Debinin Hey Kavim. As we've seen, we need 5 lines. V'im Yispardu, and if you separate them, in Revach Shvina Yamin Yismal Nashav Kal Avir. Because if the 2 thumbs aren't together, then it's not considered one airspace in the middle. V'yeshe Kasu Shvein Milu Milu Tinish in every word. V'kolshkin Bein Bracha LeBracha. Rashi LeKarev as like Godolim, and then they're able to put their thumbs together. Matzbais B'Shama Yefais. If the Kehanim are tired, sometimes you'll see. Of course, as we're going to see, you should not be gazing at the Gehanim, but the Kehanim hands are covered anyways, so it's not really an issue. But you'll see sometimes an elderly Kayin that has an issue keeping his hands up, he could lower his hands between the words and between the brachos. V'cholkin, that's why he says, Sivkatim Memdalet, it says the Mishnah Berurah. Te'isa b'tanchuma parshas Nasai, says the Tanchuma mashkiach minachal loy nois. He's mashkiach, he oversees, he perceives through the windows. This is how the bracha is going to be flowing through their hands. Says which are hey charakim. Uparsik abeim kidei sivkatin menvav rotzalaymar. Like Moshe echad yada b'tfilah. Not like you lift up one hand in davening, but both hands are going to be raised. We're going to do Sifkat, we're going to do Sif Yud Gimel, and then we'll see a little bit of the Dirshu. Says the Mishnah Berurah, says the Mechaber, Sif Yud Gimel. So they finish the bracha, they turn around, their hands are raised. The Kehanim begin saying Yivarecha, says the Rama Visha Mishkan Milas Yivarecha Yikro Yisrael Shech Siva Tchila. That the Shatz yells out Yivarecha, then the Kehanim say Yivarecha. And that is our minhag. What the Sfardim do, I'll be honest, I don't really know. Continues the Machaber. And afterwards, Makros of Sheikh Sibra Mila, Sheikh Sibra calls out each and every word. Veinam Achrav, and the Kehanim answer. I'll call Mila Chisamu Pasuk, reach until he finishes the first Pasuk. Va'azanim Sibra, Amen. Yivarecha, Hashem Yishmerecha. Sibra says Amen. V'chenachar Pasuk Sheni. V'chenachar Pasuk Shlishi. So it says Mishnah Berurah over here, Sivkatan Mem Zayin, Maschilin HaKoyanim. Ubekayin echa, let's say there's only one kayin, shein kayin lai. As we saw, when there's one kayin, the kayin begins the bracha without the shots yelling out kayanim. So even though when it came to calling, prompting the kayin to begin dochening by one kayin, he did by himself. When it comes to the psukim, it's not the same thing. You can't make a mistake in the first word. So the Mechaber held that the first word Yivarecha you do not have to prompt. The Shatz does not have to call out. The pasuk says, "Amar lam," you say to them, "V'darshinan," and we learn, "Melame." From here we learn out shechazin oimer lam imru. That the chazin says, "Umikol makam urak lamitzul chatchila ve'inu ma'akiv." It's not ma'akiv if the chazin does not prompt the koyin to say Yivarecha Hashem Yishmerecha, etc. Which we'll get to, Beis HaKnesset Shkuli Kehanim Ayim Sham, which we'll get to, B'siyat Shemaya, from the Pri Chadash, the Raya. that the shots, the chazan yelling out is not ma'akiv because of void. The sheikh sibur zarch lahakros mitach siddur v'loy bal peh. The sheikh sibur should be calling out from a siddur. Sheikh sibur should not do it bal peh. So now let's just see some dirshus before we call it a day. It is a bit late, but let's go to the dirshu number 60, which points out at what precise moment do the Kohanim raise their hand. Says the Zas Torah for the Shulchan Aruch, it sounds like at the end of the bracha, so that the bracha should be over las yasan. You first make the bracha, then they lift their hands, which is the action of the benching the bracha of the Berachas Kohanim. As well, the Shulchan Aruch Rav says the same. However, there's a sheet of the Rishonim, the Meiri, that says they should lift their hand before the bracha, and as well, the Das Torah and the Kavachayim saves in the Panach Araza. Again, what is the prevalent minhag? It would seem like the Graz and the Das Torah that they, but I don't believe that's true. I think their hands are raised when they say the bracha. But let's continue. Number 61. How do they raise their hand? Says the Kiryat Sefer and the Be'er Sheva that since the Zeroya Kula Nikras Yad, you have to lift your hand opposite your shoulders from the other side. And Avnei Nezer says you have to lift up the palms of your hand. You don't have to lift the fingers. Now this is where it gets exactly the precise way they hold their hands. This is what we're discussing over here, not which we're going to leave for the Kehanim, different minhagim. We're not going to get involved in that right now. Let's continue. Number 62 points out that there are differences. That when it comes to raising their hands opposite their shoulders, that's li'ikuva, as we're going to see. Whereas one hand being higher than the next, as we saw that the right hand is a little bit higher than the left, that is not li'ikuva. The Gais Maimonides says that's al pi Kabbalah, which sounds like it's in li'ikuva. The Sha'al Shuvas Avnei Nezer says the same thing. So again, always important to know which is li'ikuva. That he says yesh lak biyah by lifting up one hand higher than the next. But important to note that being opposite your shoulders, that is li'ikuva. What does a lefty do? Says Chaim Kanievsky, though he goes by the right of the world and not his own right. So all Kohanim will have the right of everyone's right higher than the left. At the time of the bracha, the Teres Kenim, the Lavush, says Al Pi the Zayar, Asr la'adam lizkoif, that's what we're saying, he cannot strain his fingers for no reason, because he's ma'ayir of the din, and he brings klala rachmana litzlan. The rivers of Ephraim says in Imar Chaim Kanievsky that the akvada is dafka to lift up his fingers above his head, but not just separating his fingers. Okay, and we're going to conclude over here on number 65, that when the Shatz calls out, Yivrecha, Hashem Yishmerecha, etc., says the Shevet HaLevi, he should say it B'kol Ram. And Rav Yashiv says the same thing, that when sometimes you see this in shuls, that the Shatz says it very quietly. Says Rav Yashiv, that's a mistake, that's a tos. As the Kolbai says, you should yell out B'kol Ram. Rishon Zalman Arbach says the same thing. And Rishon Zalman says he doesn't understand. Why do people call out quietly? How do we answer if the minhag ha'olam comes along, Rav Oldenburg, that sits at Eliezer, and he says, so that it should not appear that the Kohanim, that the Shatz is saying it together with the Kohanim. But again, all the Gedalim, Shevet HaLevi, Rav Yashiv, Rav Shlomo Zalman, they're all teaching us you should not do this. So maybe there is some sort of minhag, but of course the appropriate way is not for the Shatz to say it quietly, but rather to say it aloud. We'll pick it up, V'siyata D'Shemaya, from Sif Yud Dalid in the next year in Mirza Hashem.